Okay, so ready to dive into this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, this time we're tackling medical legal evaluations
Uh,
in workers' compensation cases.
right.
Specifically, we're looking at Chapter 15
Okay.
of a text focused on physician conduct and ethics
All right.
within California's workers' comp system.
Yeah, California. Big one. Got to know it.
For sure, so many people are impacted by workers' comp.
Absolutely. And the ethics are crucial.
Definitely. So let's break down what we're going to be looking at.
Sure.
We've got treating physicians,
Right.
and then we've got those QMEs.
Qualified medical evaluators.
Yeah, and the rules surrounding their evaluations can get pretty complicated.
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of people assume it's just like any other doctor's visit.
Right, you get hurt, you see a doctor, end of story.
But when you add in workers' comp, it's a whole different scenario.
Totally. So in a regular situation, your doctor's just focused on, like, making you better.
Right. Your health and well-being are their priority.
But with workers' comp, there's this added layer
Yeah, because they might also have to give an opinion.
about, like, if your injury was actually work-related.
Exactly. And that opinion directly impacts whether you get benefits.
Which can be huge, right? Like, life-changing for some people.
It totally is. So suddenly, it's not just about your health, it's about legal stuff too.
It's like they're wearing two hats at the same time.
Totally. Caregiver and evaluator.
Which sounds kind of tough to balance.
It can be, for sure. Because ethically, doctors are supposed to be on their patient side, you know.
Advocate for what's best for them.
Exactly. But they also have this legal obligation to be impartial for the workers' comp system.
So it's this weird tension.
It is. And there's this case, Fireman's Fend v. WCAB.
Oh, yeah, I remember reading about that one.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
It actually established the right for an injured worker to have a witness during their QME exam.
Which makes sense when you think about it.
Right. Because if the QME is kind of playing both sides,
It could feel a little less like a doctor's appointment and more like, I don't know, an interrogation or something.
exactly. So having someone there for support can help,
Makes you feel less alone.
for sure. And it could be anyone, a friend, family member, even a lawyer.
That's good to know. What about recording the evaluation, though? Is that allowed?
So that's where California law gets a little unclear.
Murky, yeah.
There's no hard and fast rule.
So it's basically up in the air.
Kinda, which is why it's always best to just check with the QME beforehand.
Before you even go.
Exactly, just to avoid any potential headaches down the road.
Transparency is key.
Definitely.
Okay, so we've talked about QMEs, but treating physicians also have specific responsibilities, right?
Oh, absolutely. They're the ones who actually file those detailed reports that can make or break a case.
So no pressure.
Right. They got to be super comprehensive.
Like, what all needs to be in there?
Okay, so think medical history, the whole shebang. Then a super detailed account of the injury, the diagnosis, treatment plan, and their opinion on if it's work-related or not.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is, but those reports are really important.
They can make all the difference.
Definitely. And then there's this whole other layer, the Confidentiality of Medical Information Act, or CMIA.
Right, CMIA. I always forget what that stands for.
It's basically a legal shield for your private medical information.
Makes sense. Gotta protect that stuff.
Totally. But workers' comp cases kind of poke a hole in that shield.
Like, some information has to be shared.
Right, with the employer and other parties involved in the claim.
So the treating physician has to walk this fine line.
They do. Trying to protect their patient's privacy while also fulfilling these legal obligations.
And that's where things can get tricky, right?
Totally. And there's this case, Pettis v. Cole, that really illustrates that.
Oh, yeah, that one was a mess.
Basically, the employer misused the medical information they got, and it ended up violating the worker's privacy.
Not good.
No, not at all. It's a reminder that everyone involved needs to handle that information super carefully.
Ethically and responsibly.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got treating physicians with this balancing act.
Right.
QMEs conducting these evaluations that can have a big impact.
Uh-huh.
And then this whole CMIA thing adding another layer of complexity.
That's a lot.
Seems like a lot of room for things to go wrong.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where Chapter 15 goes next.
Laying out all the potential pitfalls.
Yeah, and the ethical dilemmas that pop up.
Mm-hmm.
One of the big ones is self-referrals.
Oh, that sounds interesting. So what does that even mean in this context?
Basically, it's when a doctor refers a patient for services that they have a financial interest in.
Okay, can you give it an example?
Sure. Like, let's say a doctor owns part of a physical therapy clinic,
Okay.
and they start sending all their workers' comp patients there.
Ah, so it's like they're getting a kickback or something?
Kinda. It creates this incentive for them to recommend more treatment, even if it's not really needed.
Which is obviously not ethical.
Not at all. And it can be especially bad if the patient doesn't even know about the doctor's financial interest.
So is that always illegal, or are there exceptions?
There are some exceptions, but they're very specific.
Like what kinds of situations?
Usually when there are very limited healthcare options available.
Okay, makes sense.
But in most cases, if there's a financial interest involved, the doctor has to disclose it.
To the patient and the insurer.
Exactly. And they usually have to get pre-authorization too.
To make sure everything's above board.
Right. And there's this case, Jones v. Target Stores,
Right.
where things didn't quite go according to plan.
Oh, what happened there?
So this doctor referred a patient for physical therapy to a clinic he worked for,
Okay.
but he didn't get the required pre-authorization.
Oh,
They didn't find him guilty of violating self-referral laws,
okay.
but because he didn't follow the procedures properly, the referral got disallowed.
So even if the referral seemed legitimate, he messed up by not dotting his I's and crossing his T's.
Exactly. And it ended up hurting the patient in the end.
Wow, so attention to detail really matters in this system.
It does. And that attention to detail is even more important when it comes to preventing something even more serious. Fraud.
Ooh, fraud. That sounds scary.
Yeah, it can have a huge impact on the whole workers' comp system.
Because it undermines the whole thing.
Exactly. And it's not just unethical, it's straight up illegal.
So what kind of things would be considered fraud in this context?
Oh, it could be all sorts of stuff.
Like what?
Exaggerating an injury, faking medical records, even staging an accident to get benefits.
Wow, people really do that.
Sadly, yes. And the penalties are no joke.
Like what kind of penalties?
It could be fines, losing your license, even prison time.
Yikes. So, yeah, honesty is definitely the best policy here.
For sure. And it's not just doctors who can be involved in fraud, by the way.
Oh, right. It could be anyone, right?
Yeah, employers, employees, anyone involved in the claim.
Everyone's got to be on the up and up.
Absolutely.
So we've got these regulations, potential conflicts of interest, and this whole fraud thing looming over everything. It all feels a bit overwhelming.
It can be, definitely. But that's why understanding the rules is so important.
Knowledge is power.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Break it all down.
Yeah, make it a little less intimidating.
Well, this has been a great start to our deep dive. I'm already feeling a little more informed, but I'm curious. Are there any, red flags people should be aware of?
Oh, for sure. Things to watch out for during an evaluation that might signal something's not quite right.
Like what?
We'll definitely explore that further.
So those red flags you were saying.
Yeah.
What should people be looking out for?
Yeah, basically, you got to trust your gut.
Okay.
If something feels off, it probably is. Like, say the doctor's rushing through the exam.
Okay.
Or they're not really listening to you.
Yeah.
Or they're asking these questions that just seem totally irrelevant to your injury.
Ooh, yeah, red flag.
Right. Those are definite signs that something might be up.
So it's not just what they ask, it's their whole attitude.
Exactly. You should feel like the doctor is taking you seriously.
Right, being thorough.
Uh-huh. They should take the time to really understand your situation.
Okay, so what about, if they seem biased?
Oh, yeah, that's another big one.
Like if they're super chummy with the insurance company rep?
Uh-huh. Or if they keep making comments that feel like they're against you.
Or even your attorney?
Exactly. Remember, the doctor's supposed to be neutral.
Right. Their job is to give an objective assessment.
Yeah, not pick sides.
It's easy to forget that when you're the one sitting there,
Oh, totally. It can feel super intimidating, especially when you're already dealing with an injury.
And the stress of a workers' comp claim on top of it.
Exactly. But you have to remember, you have rights.
Okay, like what?
You have the right to be treated with respect,
Okay.
to have your concerns heard,
Uh,
and to understand what's happening during the evaluation.
It's your body, your health.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have a witness present if you can.
Right, we talked about that earlier.
It can make a huge difference in how comfortable you feel.
So if someone's in that situation and they're thinking, okay, this isn't right, what can they actually do about it?
Well, the first step is to just voice your concerns.
To the doctor directly.
Yeah, sometimes it's just a misunderstanding, you know.
Yeah.
But if that doesn't work, or if it's something more serious, you can file a complaint
With who?
with the Division of Workers' Compensation, the DWC.
Oh, right, the DWC. Is there a specific process for that?
Yeah, they have all the information on their website
Okay.
and forms you can fill out. You can also contact their office directly if you need help.
So either online or in person.
Exactly. And the important thing is to document everything.
Like write down everything that happened.
Yeah. The date and time of the evaluation, the doctor's name, and specific details about what made you uncomfortable.
And probably a good idea to talk to a lawyer too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Especially one who specializes in workers' comp cases.
They can help you figure out what to do.
Exactly. And make sure your rights are protected.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here.
Yeah, we have.
Ethical guidelines, potential conflicts of interest, even those red flags to look out for.
It's a lot to keep track of.
But zooming out a bit, what's the big picture here? Like, why is ethical conduct in these evaluations so important?
It all boils down to fairness, really,
Okay.
and protecting the integrity of the whole workers' comp system.
Because if it's not fair, it's not working.
Exactly. The system is supposed to help people who are injured on the job.
Get the treatment they need to recover.
Uh-huh. And ethical evaluations are a key part of that.
So it's not just about following rules, it's about making sure the system works as intended.
Right. It's got to work for the people who need its support.
And for the employers who contribute to it.
Exactly. Because if it's full of bias and fraud, it just doesn't work.
It becomes less about helping people and more about taking advantage.
Exactly. And that can have ripple effects.
Like how?
Well, if people lose trust in the medical professionals involved in these evaluations.
Then they might start to distrust the whole healthcare system.
Exactly. And that's a big problem.
Trust is so important.
It is. So ethical conduct isn't just about checking boxes.
It's about upholding these bigger values.
Yeah. Fairness, objectivity, respect for everyone involved.
It's about making sure the system operates with integrity.
And that it ultimately serves the greater good.
Okay, now, we've been talking about California specifically,
Uh-huh.
but how much of this applies in other states?
That's a good question. A lot of the fundamental principles are probably the same.
Like fairness and objectivity.
Right. But the specific laws and regulations can be different.
So what are some ways those rules might differ?
Well, some states might be stricter about self-referrals
Okay.
or have different rules about who can be present during an evaluation.
Could some states actually be more restrictive than California?
It's possible. Some might only allow an attorney to be there,
Wow.
or they might not allow any third party at all.
That seems kind of harsh.
It can be, especially for someone who's already feeling vulnerable.
And the rules about recording and evaluation can vary too, right?
Right, big time. Some states might explicitly allow it,
Okay.
while others might forbid it completely.
It seems like it would be easier if everyone was on the same page.
Yeah, from a logistical standpoint, it definitely would.
More consistency across the board.
Right, it could reduce confusion
Yeah.
and help ensure things are done fairly.
And maybe even prevent some of those ethical problems we've been talking about.
Potentially, yeah. But creating national standards wouldn't be easy.
I bet there'd be pushback from certain states.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
They might not want to give up control over their own systems.
Right. But it's an interesting thought.
It is. I mean, we're talking about a system that impacts so many people across the country.
Millions of workers and employers.
Exactly. So having clearer guidelines could make a big difference.
Wow, so this deep dive into California has really opened up a whole other can of worms.
It has. And it shows how important it is to be informed.
No matter where you live.
Exactly. Do your research and know your rights.
Speaking of which, do you have any, parting words of wisdom for someone navigating this system?
Absolutely. The most important thing is to remember that you're not alone.
Okay.
There are resources out there to help you.
Like what?
Your state's workers' compensation agency, attorneys who specialize in these cases, even advocacy groups.
So don't be afraid to reach out for help if you need it.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask questions.
Of your doctor, the QME, anyone involved in your case.
Right. It's your health, your future. You have the right to know what's going on.
Great advice. So where do we go from here?
I'd say the next step is to dig a little deeper.
Into those specific regulations and guidelines.
Yeah, in your own state. See what your workers' comp agency offers and learn about the complaint process.
So this deep dive is just the starting point.
Exactly. We've given you the tools. Now it's up to you to use them.
Arm yourself with knowledge and advocate for yourself.
Exactly.
Well, this has been super informative.
Yeah, it's been great.
You know, it's wild, right? Like we started with something that seems so simple,
Yeah.
a doctor evaluating injury, but wow. Add in the legal stuff, the money, all the workers' comp stuff.
Yeah. It gets complicated fast.
Super complicated. And honestly, what's been most eye-opening for me is just how much it can vary
Oh, yeah.
from state to state. I mean, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
What applies in California might be totally different somewhere else.
Exactly. So anyone listening thinking, well, this doesn't apply to me.
I'm not in California.
Right, not so fast.
A lot of the core issues are universal.
Like, what are some of those big ones?
Well, those conflicts of interest,
Yeah.
the importance of knowing your rights, the need for transparency, making sure things are done ethically.
That applies everywhere.
It does.
So if someone's listening and they're about to go through this evaluation process,
Anywhere in the country.
what's the one thing they should absolutely remember?
I'd say the most important thing is knowledge is power.
Okay, love that.
The more you know about the system, the rules, your rights,
Uh-huh.
the better you'll be able to handle everything.
So do your research. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Exactly. Be proactive.
What are some good questions to ask?
Well, you can ask the doctor about their experience with workers' comp cases,
Okay.
if they're familiar with the specific laws in your state,
Uh-huh.
even if they have any financial interests that could affect things.
It's your health on the line. You have a right to know.
Absolutely. And remember, you're not alone in this.
Okay, good point.
There are resources out there to help you.
Like what?
Well, your state's workers' comp agency, for one,
Right.
and attorneys who specialize in these cases.
Okay.
There are even advocacy groups that can offer support and guidance.
So yeah, you don't have to go through it alone.
Definitely not.
So be informed, be skeptical, ask questions,
That's the key.
trust your gut, and don't back down if something seems off.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This whole deep dive has really shown how important these ethical considerations are.
Right, because it's easy to get caught up in the legal stuff, the paperwork,
Uh-huh.
but ultimately this system impacts real people.
People's lives and their livelihoods.
Exactly. So making sure it operates ethically and fairly is crucial.
Couldn't agree more. Can't lose sight of the human element.
Exactly. That's what we've tried to do today, bring that human element back in
Give people the information they need to understand this complex system.
and hopefully feel empowered to advocate for themselves.
Well said. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
It's been my pleasure, really.
This deep dive has been incredibly valuable.
Glad to hear it.
And for everyone listening, this is just the beginning. Keep learning, keep asking questions, keep fighting for what's right.
Here, here.